The Haunted PS1 demo disc, not actually a physical demo disc, is a collection of 17 games, some more polished and finite, some more unfinished and clearly in progress, all in the style of PS1 horror games, and all available for download for free.
Hey kid.
Who? Me?
Yeah, you dummy. You wanna play some cool video games?
Yeah, I want to play games.
The itch.io page for the disc reads, "Roused by the crackle of static, a lingering sense of dread crawls across the floor. You sit alone in your room. A dimly lit memory repeats in your head. 17 demos too horrible to describe keep you from your bed. Each one is a personally crafted nightmare. You've tried to tell others. No one understands. A CRT you don't remember owning flashes to life. Frozen in place, you look upon the flickering screen to spy a dismal, bloodied scene. A cracked and faded jewel case sits close beside. A pale gray plastic box sits in front, emitting a low whirring noise. Will you take to the controller, or let yourself be taken over?" I'm going to talk about each of the 17 games individually, including my feelings about both the original release games and some of the games that were significantly altered with a later update. But before I do any of that, I have to say that this is a triumph. This is amazing. This is so cool and so much fun, and is such an exciting sampler of what is available right now as far as weird and engaging and independently produced horror games. I initially saw that Brogan Hackett and Modus Interactive, two of my favorite developers of weird and beautiful short horror games, were involved, which piqued my interest, along with just the concept of a PS1 style demo disc and how much people I follow on Twitter were talking about it. And I'm not as familiar with anyone else involved, but I was pretty immediately converted to being a fan of a lot of these developers, even after playing just like a 10-minute demo that they made. I'll get to it later in the review, but I love Delusion so much that as soon as I was done playing it, I backed the creator's Patreon to get updated versions of that game and to be able to play it longer, just as an example of how cool the games on the demo disc are. I also want to say that while I am going to be honest about how I felt about all of these games and am pretty critical in some of my assessments, please take into consideration that every one of these games is cool as hell, this whole project is cool as hell, and I have so much respect for everyone that worked on this. And if you play every game all the way through, you are getting hours of completely free entertainment, all of which was made with sincerity and a clear love of classic experimental and horror games. My criticisms are more comparing the games with each other than to any big budget AAA titles, and I tried to be fair in my assessments. And the fact that some games in the collection are much more polished, or more fun to play, or more emotionally affecting than others, does not mean that you shouldn't play all of them. They're right there, and they're free, and they're all weird and creative, and you might as well play them. I'm going to talk about the games in the order that they're listed on the disc. I know there's a secret game somewhere on the disc, but I haven't found it and played it yet, and I didn't want to cheat to find it or spoil it if I did, so I won't be covering it. So, A Place Forbidden has a very pronounced and well-established atmosphere. You can practically smell the old books and mold, and it feels dusty. It gives the sense of a place that is actively degrading in front of you. I wasn't a fan of the puzzles in it, but I certainly admired how well its setting was conveyed, and some of the images in it were shocking and creepy. Delusion is to me the most technically impressive game on the demo disc. It's an open-feeling world full of grain, garish neon colors that I loved and that were used very effectively, ghosts, skeletons, cruel gods, death, paranoia, oppression, and fear. It has such a sense of scale and so many stunning, gorgeous views. It's not like a ripoff of any Zelda games or of Zelda gameplay mechanics, but it reminds me of a Zelda game and the rush I get when playing it, that feeling of adventure, of exploring and uncovering weird, small mysteries, only in a darker and more cynical and more upsetting world. It's brilliant, and I am so excited to eventually play the full version of the game. It's delightful, and I would highly recommend it. I wanted to like Dead Heat, and I certainly like some of its basic conceits. It's some kind of noir-style detective game where one of the detectives is a zombie, maybe? But it was really glitchy and had some basic design and accessibility problems. The way the text populates on the screen is distracting, and the plain color text blends into the background way too much. I also found the text sound kind of grating. I had trouble with the controls and with even understanding how I was supposed to interact with the game. The updated version had some kind of issue on launch where I couldn't select anything that I was only able to fix by launching the older version of the game in windowed mode, which carried over and fixed the issue. The updated version is definitely less glitchy and seems to have more content to it, but it still felt unpolished and confusing, and like a lot of ideas were just kind of thrown together. There are filters you can switch between to give the feel of different eras to the visuals of the game, which is neat, but like a lot of this game, it just seems to have been added in because it sounded cool, not as a part of any kind of cohesive or polished idea. But, of course, this is a demo. I bet the finished version of this game, if they pull off everything they're going for, will be really cool, and the developers seem aware of and apologetic about the fact that it's unpolished. And it's entirely possible that I just didn't understand the controls and missed out on what I was supposed to be doing. It could still be on me, and you should still check it out. But the bad AI and hard-to-read text and other glitches and issues definitely hampered my experience with this game, and I would have preferred something simpler and less ambitious that better accomplished its goals. Effigy did remind me of old-school FPS games, and it has a well-established sense of wide scale and a unique setting. The only aspects of it I found frustrating were imprecise controls getting in the way of me completing time-based puzzles, and the fact that I spent a lot of time on this game for the ending to just kind of trail off. Again, yes, of course, it's a demo. I'm not expecting a grand, polished narrative, but a lot of the games on the disc have a pretty clear arc to them, and while I liked Effigy, I wouldn't have spent as much time on it as I did if I had known it would just trail off at the end. Erasure is one of the more experimental games on the demo disc. It has a unique sense of humor, and it's a weird, abstract, eerie twist on standard sci-fi themes around simulations, and maybe the morality of manipulating them. I liked it a lot. Fatum Betula? I'm not even gonna look up how to pronounce that. Is beautiful and frightful. It's a game of grief and dreams and imagination, and with many games on the disc, but especially this one, there are none of the constraints of commercialism or needing to market to or appease an audience. It made me wonder what old games could have been if they'd been approached in the same way. Not that there weren't weird experimental dreamscape nightmare games on the PS1, just that there could have been more of them. This game made me retroactively reassess my view of the entire retro PS1 aesthetic. In games as artful as this one, the aesthetic and the use of tropes from those old games all become tools to reclaim a chance to make art that could have existed if commercial interests didn't influence console games so heavily. It's that engaging and weird and haunting and beautiful. My only complaint is some of the writing seemed a little bit pretentious. Small complaint though. I think this is my favorite game on the disc. I don't expect it to be everyone's favorite. There are certainly more complex and technically robust games that are just as beautiful here, like Delusion. But weird, small-scale, creepy, charming grief dreamscapes definitely appeal to me in particular. Filthbreed is one of the few games on the disc that doesn't really fit the PS1 aesthetic. Not that the aesthetic is lacking. The game is creepy, and the filthy lens effect is cool. The game has a sense of humor to it, and I liked the occasional reminder that there's a world outside of this gross, dingy setting, given by beams of daylight coming in through windows. And the cult narrative and cow skulls and gross, dingy feel gave the game a True Detective vibe. I absolutely hated the jump scare death animation, though. It was not scary, it was annoying. Also, I thought it was funny that the game's icon is just a gun. Heartworm's description is a very overt Silent Hill homage, and the main character looks like a Resident Evil character, or like a Lara Croft type. The game's credits are really creepy, and some of the shots and scenes in it are creepy as well. The game definitely has potential, but the fixed camera angles and the style of controls it used were frustrating. And the mental illness angle in horror games like this, to me, it gets old super fast, and it's just kind of cliched and boring. I really don't like that approach or that angle, especially when it's used in kind of like a very basic, standard way. Insomnio is described as an attempt to recreate the developer's dreams as games. I love some of the choices the developer made in portraying these dream games. Like the way that the ground moves in the second game. The surreal succession of vignettes reminded me of the old browser-based game 99 Rooms. This whole game was scary and felt haunted, like it was instilled with pure dread.
Someone was murdered in this room. It's fucking alright.
And really did resemble what it feels like to dream and to have a nightmare. One of the strengths of a lot of the games on the demo disc isn't that they're scary, though some of them are, but rather that they're really unique, surreal little explorations of dreams and feelings. Insomnio is really cool. That's definitely one of the ones I would recommend. Here's my first set of notes on the first release of Killer Bees, verbatim. Hardcore filter. VHS mode, can't see shit. Reminds me of PT. Didn't get super far. Kept getting killed by bees. Can't tell if gun does much. And I have to say, out of all the games on here that got updates, this was the biggest improvement. I went from being frustrated and confused to really loving the updated version of the game. It's a unique concept executed very well. and with unique gameplay that is never spelled out for you, but is still intuitive. I'd rather not describe any of it because I found the active discovery fun in and of itself, but I will say you're exploring a weird building, and there are, of course, killer bees. The game operates with its own logic that is original but easy to follow, and there are a lot of flashes of images with really disturbing implications. The sound design is also great and very realistic. Like, some of the aspects of this game are very stylized, but the soundscape you're walking through feels very real. And even when the game is not actively threatening your character, it's still menacing and creepy. This went from being one of the most frustrating games on the disc to me to one of my favorites, and is a great example of a simple but unique concept executed flawlessly. And it's really fun and unsettling. You can also choose between PS1 mode and VHS mode for visuals, and while I liked both, I did like the VHS mode more, especially after alterations with the update that made the game easier to see and play. Neko Yume, or Cat Dream, is, as I understand it, an homage to the game LSD Dream Emulator, but with cats? And maybe referencing Yume Nikki? I have not played either of those games, so I don't know. But I love the work Modus has done in the past, Sanguine Sanctum especially, so I was excited about playing this one. I was a little frustrated when I started this game because I wasn't sure of what I should do or of how I was expected to interact with the world it presented, but then I had a lot more fun when I realized I should just goof off and see what I came across. The game overall is very charming and funny, and I know I keep using this word to describe games on the disc, but yes, it's also very weird. I laughed a lot at this segment, which gets the game's tone across pretty well. Ode to a Moon has a very cool title screen and a striking color palette, and I liked how it shifted its atmosphere with VHS effects. It's a spooky game that uses sound well, and I like the way its 4:3 aspect ratio was used. It has some lovely landscapes as well. One problem I had was that it was kind of easy to get lost in the game, and I had trouble being able to tell where I was going a couple of times, like in different segments of the game. I still really enjoyed it though. Orange County is a horror game where you're on a skateboard, and I found the controls kind of confusing and unintuitive. Dying in this game is scary though. As far as I could tell, the objective is to ride around getting different drinks, trying not to get hit by cars. There's a lot of creativity in the concept and presentation, and it's worth playing just for how unique it is, but I found it kind of frustrating and never really got it. It never really clicked with me what I was supposed to be doing. At least my experience trying to play all these games all the way through, or close to all the way through, to review them, the more difficult to understand what was happening or what was expected of me, the less time I wanted to spend on a game trying to just figure out how to interact with it before moving on. When a game isn't a big demo disc like this, I think focusing on something that someone can get into, play, and then move on. Not that you should make your game disposable, but just like it's one of 17 games. If I'm trying to play the whole demo disc, I don't have time to sit here and learn some kind of like really, really complicated control scheme for a game that I'm going to play for like 15 minutes. I just preferred games like Fate and Betula, which were weird and mystifying in content and in how to progress the story, but super easy to understand how to play. Or games like Killer Bees that are more challenging to play, but still pretty quickly clicked for me. To games like Orange County or Dead Heat that I had trouble even understanding in the first place. Sauna 2000 is wild. My biggest complaint is that it was super glitchy for me, with subtitles lagging behind audio and glitches actually preventing me from beating the game or seeing what was going on while some really wild stuff was happening. So I had to keep replaying the game, trying to avoid the glitches to actually be able to complete it, which kind of broke some of the atmosphere for me. But even though it was one of the most problematic games on the disc for me gameplay-wise, it was still one of my favorites. From the music to the game's sense of humor to the mounting sense of dread, I loved the concept and I loved playing it. And regardless of technical problems, it ruled. The basic conceit is that you have to start up a sauna by chopping wood and collecting water and so on, and then something weird starts happening. It's surprising and funny and creepy, and I really enjoyed it. Snowy Castle was the only game on the disc where the proportions felt a little off. I don't know if it was intentional, but my character felt a little short, or like the scale of the environment was off. The game was somewhat atmospheric, and I did like the little weird, mysterious story it had, especially how it ended. You walk around an old castle in the snow lighting candles. But especially for the outside candles, some of them felt like I was just mentally crisscrossing the map. like going through the scenery to light candles out of obligation, versus the sense of exploration you feel while inside the castle. But even then, it's definitely a fun game that executes a simple concept well. I like Tasty Ramen's title screen, and I thought the color palette, out of all the games on the disc, felt the most accurate to PS1 era kids games. Like the aesthetic was a very accurate homage, not necessarily to old horror games, but old wacky kids games, especially from Japan. The game itself, though, is what I would refer to as an anxiety simulator, rather than a horror game. You walk around collecting keys, trying to avoid a patrolling ramen mascot that kills you if it sees you. This game got an update to balance its gameplay, and I did consider the updated version more forgiving and more fair, but it still isn't something I'd play on my own time for fun. I really like dread-soaked atmospheric horror rather than a game that just makes me anxious. But that's a subjective assessment, and I still did really appreciate how well this game executes what it set out to do. Still neat. My first impression of Until Biglight is that it is gorgeous and weird. You play a mouse traversing the underbrush with all these canted camera angles and little mouse establishments. Pretty quickly, though, I found some problems with the game. Until Biglight is overtly anti-capitalist, which is cool, but the way it's handled is kind of clunky and obvious. The game has too much dialogue, and I'd rather that same information be conveyed more concisely and in a way better suited to the medium. And you're very much railroaded as far as what you can do in the game, which I'm normally fine with in games like that. I like point A to B walking sims and weird little barely interactive experimental games, but it does give the thin illusion of choice that falls apart pretty quickly. The visuals and the representation of a little capitalist hellscape mouse world run by evil cats are both fantastic, but I definitely want to see the dialogue tightened up a little in future versions. Okay, there's all 17 games. I really enjoyed playing this. I can't recommend it enough. I think at this point a lot of people come to my channel for recommendations for weird independent art to check out, and this is definitely one of those. Although this already got a fair amount of attention, it's not like it's a super obscure collection of games, but I figured a lot of people in my audience wouldn't have heard of it, and it took me a while to review it, especially because I wanted to play the updated versions of the games I had already played before they updated them, and I wanted to go a little bit in depth on every game. When final versions of these games come out, for some of them, I'll probably do a full review. I could definitely see myself doing a full review for like Dread Delusion, which already has so much going on with it, even though you can tell it's barely complete, like as far as the scope of that game goes. I was surprised at how many of these games were more surreal than horror games. It doesn't feel like they were mismarketed. It was just a pleasant surprise to me, although most of them were both. It was also weird how much a lot of the games kind of fixated on Japanese culture and had like Japanese characters in them. I don't think it was like offensive or problematic, and it makes sense because, I mean, PlayStation was like a Japanese console, and a lot of the games that people would have played growing up were originally in Japanese. It was just something that kept coming up again and again, and I thought was funny, or that stood out to me rather. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting my work on Patreon. I also have a Ko-fi, and thanks.